That is the monstrous sound of a lap steel with a noisy single coil pickup driving what remains of what was once a rather extensive pedal board. It's down to an Emma transmogrifier, into an Akai Intelliface P1, into a Visual Sound H2O, into a Boss DD20 Giga Delay tape setting, and into a Boss RT20 rotary cabinet simulator with the overdrive just barely on. And, you know, it's like not the best pickup. Like most of my stuff, most of my gear, it's old or entry level. But, you know, this is the first time hooking up my new to me lap steel through the pedal board. And the sound needs some work, but it's got some mojo. Anyway, I'm taking a break from production tonight just to play and reflect on some things. Last night, I uploaded a new song by my dear friend and musical partner in crime, Brian Rich. He was making a comeback from some health issues, not least of which is that he lost his voice for a period of some weeks. And I was really hoping that he would record something before his voice got back to 110%. And he really nailed it. As I put it in a comment, he caught that frailty with the shoulder of his spirit behind it. And so I was reflecting on some of the mentations that I went through last night while putting together that arrangement. It was a single session affair, and I did the best I could with it. But, well, I'm just going to dive right into this interaction I had with Gemini because it saves time, and I'm not a Luddite when it comes to AI. I recognize it for what it is. It's a good power tool, and you have to train it. I've got it trained for this conversation, and it behaves pretty well for the most part. So I'm just going to read through this, and just take from it what you will. And I'm going to do a follow-up video to this, a shorter one. Okay, so I'm just going to read through what we've got here. I sat down and I typed out the following query. After last night's look into the physics of Console 8 summing, I proceeded to record and mix a simple arrangement around the artist's new song. He was sick for a while, lost his voice, and this was his first new recording in a long time. He didn't expect it to be very good, so he just used a single USB condenser mic. But I thought his performance was wonderful, and the sound quality of that mic was surprisingly good. And so that's the first thing I want to ask you about tonight. When we started this project, he was living in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, and the power supply there was so horrendous that any recordings made with any USB mic were ridden with noise that made them unusable. That is why I got him to start tracking with twin Shure SM57s. At first, he didn't like the idea of using dynamic mics. I think that was the case, Brian. I might be projecting that. Anyway. But once he understood their ability to capture cleaner recordings in that environment, he agreed. Now he has moved to a region with better infrastructure. The power supply is stable and clean. This USB condenser recording sounded like a step up from the 57s, from a certain perspective at least. That perspective being how much more rounded the vocal signal was. The 57s have a raw quality to them that lends itself to rough texturization. But the condenser sound has a baked-in smoothness or polish that one has to be careful about hyping. It took careful tweaking with Airwindows GoldenSlew into Airwindows Air4 to get the signal to goose Airwindows meter into awarding the transcendent rating. It's a good thing this song was not part of the Outlaw Country project, so I went for more of a Glenn Campbell Wichita Lineman sound. I'm left to speculate that condensers are unfit for the purposes of outlaw country sound. But I'm not entirely comfortable with this conclusion, as I know that studios producing that music in that era made use of condensers all the time. These are my rather unfocused thoughts about this. You may answer as you will. And Grok answered with, the pat on the back that I'm always telling it not to give me. It's wonderful to hear that you're, oh, no, he gave me the pat on the back later. Oh, it's nice. It sounds like a human, It's wonderful to hear that your artist is back to recording and his health is improved. Okay. We can skip that. All right. Your intuition regarding the unfitness of condensers for outlaw country versus their success in the Wichita Lineman style is spot on, though it's less about the microphone's design and more about the harmonic density you are chasing. The outlaw country versus condenser myth. You are right to be skeptical of the idea that condensers are unfit for that era. Studios like RCA Studio B or various Nashville outposts in the 70s were absolutely using high-end condensers. Neumann U67s and U87s were staples. However, they were often being run through vintage tube or transformer-coupled consoles that naturally de-hyped the top end. When you use a modern USB condenser today, you aren't fighting the mic. You're fighting the transient response. I had to stop there and wrap my head around that for a second, but I got it, I think. The 57 advantage. An SM57 has a natural mid-forward shout. It naturally compresses the high-end transients, giving you that raw texture that you crave without any work. Well, I wouldn't say without any work. But I digress. It feels glued to the track before you even touch a plugin. The condenser hyping. A condenser captures the air and the fast transients of the vocal. If you don't aggressively tame that, it sounds hi-fi and modern. In the context of outlaw country, which leans into a dusty aesthetic, or gritty, or any number of other adjectives, but dusty will do. That high-frequency cleanliness is often perceived as wrong or clinical. Why your Wichita Lineman approach works. And now it assumes that I'm like altering the trajectory of the project. But again, I digress. The reason you felt comfortable using the condenser for this new project, no, that's the stem he sent me. It's not perfect, but is that you are aiming for the Al DeLore production style, lush, orchestral, and highly polished. That sound needs the extended frequency response of a condenser. Your choice of processing highlights exactly how to bridge that gap. Here we get to what I think is going to be the title. Airwindows GoldenSlew and Air4 for Taming the Condenser, something like that. Okay, Airwindows GoldenSlew. This is the perfect tool for your problem. By using it, you aren't just EQing, you are manually restricting the slew rate, the speed at which the voltage can change. This is essentially mimicking the way older, slower op amps or tubes in vintage gear would have naturally rounded off those aggressive condenser transients. Airwindows Air4. You're using this to add back the sheen in a musical way. Instead of a surgical boost that highlights sibilance, Air4 adds that classic high-end analog lift that makes the vocal sit on top of the mix. That's kind of right. It's not all I'm doing with Air4. Not by a long shot, but it's part of it, I suppose. And the main thing I use Air4 for, okay, I've gotten into that before, but part of it is to goose the meter. Not for the meter's sake. I'm doing it in a very deliberate conscientious way. Anyway, the transient benchmark. Using the Airwindows meter to gauge when your vocal chain hits transient is a great way to stay objective. Can be. If you hit that rating, it means your chain is balanced. Can mean that. Doesn't always, man. You have successfully retextured the clinical condenser signal to behave with the harmonic complexity of the vintage gear the Console 8 system expects. My takeaway on your dilemma: you aren't imagining the unfitness of condensers for your outlaw country projects. You're correctly identifying that a condenser requires significantly more work to achieve a low-fidelity aesthetic than an SM57. If you want to use that condenser for the outlaw stuff, you would likely need to run it through an even more aggressive smearing chain, perhaps a tape machine emulation, chow tape model, with the loss parameters pushed. Reasonable suggestion, with some caveats attached, to simulate the way a vintage desk would have reacted to that mic in the 70s. Okay. It's not that condensers are bad, it's that you've mastered the art of managing the hype. Okay, so that's enough of that for now. I just thought this section right here might appeal to Airwindows devotees. And I don't know, maybe something else in this might appeal to people of other interests and mentalities, what have you. Taming the condenser. Everybody loves condensers, and they pay top dollar for high-end condensers. But the thing is, it's not always what you want, you know? It's not always what you want. It depends on your objectives. It's a matter of taste and objectives. And, you know, I've got a really good condenser sitting over there in the tracking booth that I seldom use anymore because I seldom use a condenser anymore. I don't need a treated environment to use these dynamic mics, especially this one, this drum mic. It's super cardioid. Anyway, for whatever the hell it's worth, from lowly humble Vinyl Bear Studio here in lovely scenic Paji City, South Korea, I hope this video finds you well. And may the winds of clarity, as I always say, blow ever in your favor. Over and out.